So let me ask you one like blanket question in a way. I think the overall theme of this episode, looking back on our conversation, has been to highlight the negative points of starting a business in Japan, like the difficulties of starting a business in Japan and growing a business compared to, let's say, the Silicon Valleys and the Chinas of the world, right? Now let's flip the question to end on a slightly more optimistic note. What would you say, if any, are actually the plus points besides just living in Japan, which is a comfortable life and it's beautiful and everything?
Well, the number one thing is that because it's a conservative society, there is opportunity. And so there are all these gaps in technological gaps that are being filled in other countries, which are still wide open here in Japan. So I think the number of business opportunities here is significant. The second thing is that Japanese customers are, they're trustworthy. So we have very little litigation. People pay their bills. They're honest. There's very little rip-off of IP. It's a great place if you've got a technologically advanced company to get started because you can incubate safely. So I think that's a huge advantage. The third one is that Japanese major corporates very much understand that they need to acquire new tech and new innovation. And so, although it's possible to get strategic investment elsewhere in the world, generally speaking, it's 100% buyout. Whereas in Japan, the investment functions just like a VC investment, 10%, 20%, and then, an understanding that two parties will get to know each other better and start collaborating, but not the big guy consuming the little guy. And so you can run an independent operation. The fourth attractive point, you mentioned lifestyle. Lifestyle is fantastic here. It is hard to find people in Japan, but it's very, very attractive for people from South Asia and Southeast Asia to emigrate to Japan. So actually, it's a huge plus for a company that's based in Japan in terms of inviting technologists across with their families. And, we have an Indian school, we have a German school, we have a French school, we have an American school. So basically, you can either attend regular schooling, Japanese style, or a hybrid, or go to a completely foreign school. There's everything for everyone, basically. Cost of living is quite low here. Japanese have been stuck in deflation for the best part of, 20, 30 years. And, a carton of eggs still costs roughly the same today as it did 30 years ago. So although the cities are somewhat expensive, if I look at the rents in places like Mumbai or Delhi, or in Amsterdam or wherever, actually Japan is a steal. And then if you're willing to live outside of the city, especially if you're allowed to work remote and then just come in, a couple of days a week, you can buy a full house in the countryside on a 8-acre block, with farming space and that sort of thing for $80,000, $50,000. Actually, Japan, because of depopulation, has 8 million empty homes called akiya. 8 million. Now, many of them are run down and you could live in them, but a number of them are not. And they're just sitting there waiting for somebody to come along and rent them. So, $80,000 to buy, or the same place, you could probably rent it for, I would say, $200-300 a month, US. So, with that kind of standard of living, okay, if you're an entrepreneur, maybe that's not necessarily a motivator, but if you're the employees of the entrepreneur, it's a huge motivator. And, that plus bringing up families and that sort of thing, it's a great place to do it. So I would say those are the main things. And of course, right now, the Japanese yen is getting way cheap, as you probably know. It's now, 130 to the US dollar, and it looks like it's going to keep going down. That means it's going to be cheaper to hire people here in Japan as well. So In that case, maybe Japanese employees will be easier to find.
That is interesting, and especially I'll make a comment on what you said about the safety of your IP as a business, and not trying to demonize a certain other country, but for example, heard this might come across like offensive to some people, but whatever. I have heard that if you're starting a tech company in China, which is kind of based on proprietary tech, often before you even come out with your product, there's a competitor using your technology in places like Shenzhen. It's not unheard of, and it's not unusual for this to happen because they believe in this kind of that technology or know-how should not be hidden. Like it should be shared with everybody if you're creating something new. And IP laws in China, for instance, are not very well enforced, I believe, right? Even from the government, like they want you as a foreign entrepreneur to share your IP with other companies and with the government themselves. So that alone is a very interesting plus point of doing business in Japan.
Yeah, I've been involved in 2 companies in China. I would say it's a much more simple thing than them wanting to share IP. If you're a foreigner in China, you have a big target on your back, and you're fair game. You're fair game to be attacked at some level and screwed. So unfortunately, China doesn't really have rule of law. It has law of the jungle, and the person who has the highest relationship in the army or in the political infrastructure or the police is the person who gets to make the rules. And if you're unlucky as a foreign company and you do business with such a person, which is generally the case, you'll quickly find that any lawsuit you bring will fail. And that, that's just the reality of that particular country. China has a lot of plus points.
Yeah.
And I do business with China, but that's one of the negative points. Yeah. And one of the plus points for Japan, as you say.